This season on Biscuits and Jam.
We've done millions of recipes over the years, or at least probably hundreds of thousands. And
Yeah.
This recipe just has stood out for some reason.
The origins of Southern Living's most popular recipe of all time has been a mystery for 40 years. That's when the hummingbird cake flittered into the magazine's Birmingham, Alabama office, signed simply from a Mrs. L.H. Wiggins.
We only knew that her name was Mrs. L.H. Wiggins, and I figured that those were the initials of her husband.
Even her first name has been a mystery until this year, when two readers emailed our editor-in-chief within hours of each other, both claiming to know Mrs. Wiggins.
Hello.
Hi, Dolores.
It's so good to finally talk to you after all these emails.
One reader knew Mrs. Wiggins as Wiggy when she nannied for that reader's family.
I was with some friends of mine several years ago, and they were talking about this hummingbird cake. And I said, well, you know, the lady that sent that recipe in used to be my nanny.
The other reader who contacted us knew Mrs. Wiggins as Eva, a loving dorm house mother for college freshmen adjusting to a new life.
She took those freshman girls under her wing, including me.
Finally, with a name, Eva Wiggins, we found the family of the woman who's been shaping the pages of Southern Living for decades. We spoke to her daughter.
I just remember being in the kitchen with her when she was baking a lot, and it seemed like she was always cooking.
And her 96-year-old baby sister.
I think I still have that recipe in the magazine.
But we still had one question. Mrs. Wiggins sent us the hummingbird cake recipe, but where did she get it? From Southern Living, this is Biscuits and Jam. We're tracking the origins of the magazine's most popular and mysterious recipe of all time, the hummingbird cake. I'm Meg Pace.
And I'm Nellah McGough.
It took 40 years, but we now know who the woman was behind the initials L.H. Wiggins. That's how she signed her name when she submitted that layer cake recipe that would go on to become Southern Living's most epic. Now that we've tracked down her origins, we still don't know where she got the recipe.
We have not solved that. We have not solved that mystery yet. So I don't know where she got it.
Southern Living editor-in-chief Sid Evans.
There are a number of theories about that. There is a cake that comes from Jamaica that's called the Dr. Bird cake. And a Dr. Bird is a kind of hummingbird. We think that it's connected to that, and maybe she picked that up somewhere.
In 1969, the Charlotte Observer ran a recipe for the Dr. Bird cake. The food editor at the time, Helen Moore, wrote that Dr. Bird is the nickname for Jamaica's national bird, the swallow-tailed hummingbird. This cake, though, was baked in a tube pan and had no frosting. Mrs. Wiggins' cake is 3 layers topped with cream cheese and pecans.
It seems like it may have its origins in Jamaica. It was printed on the back of like a publicity marketing thing from a Jamaican Airlines.
Southern Living assistant food editor Pat York has looked into the origin of this cake several times.
We believe it came to us from Jamaica as part of a letter from a Jamaican Airlines. They were trying to drum up tourism. And so, of course, versions started appearing in those spiral-bound community cookbooks. It's just 2 pancakes or loaf cakes, and then at some point we threw cream cheese on top of it and made it a Southern thing.
I scoured the internet looking for the origins of Mrs. Wiggins' version with the frosting. Every article, story, and even the hummingbird cake's Wikipedia page claim that little article on bananas in Southern Living's February 1978 issue is the very first publication of that layered cake with cream cheese frosting. And the first time a recipe was published under the hummingbird cake title. All the earlier versions had the Dr. Bird moniker.
So many recipes are so hard to track down because they're passed along on recipe cards and by word of mouth and just, through families and friends. But the recipe that she sent in was the first one that we've been able to find that was a layer cake using cream cheese frosting.
Hoping that maybe this recipe was a family heirloom, Nellah and I asked Mrs. Wiggins' little sister about it. Mrs. Evelyn Rakes is 96 years old, and she says she still has the February 1978 issue with her sister's famous cake inside. Do you know where she got the recipe?
I really don't. I really don't know.
We also tried Joan Steele. Mrs. Wiggins nannied Joan's children a year after her cake was published. Do you know where she found the recipe?
I have no clue. No idea. I don't recall her saying where she found it.
Nellah had one more idea. Put in a call to one of Southern Living's most revered veterans. Nellah describes her as genius.
Hi, this is Mary Ellen Ferry, and I was senior food editor at Southern Living for a number of years. I worked there for almost 20 years.
Oh, Lordy, girl. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Good.
It's so good to hear your voice.
You
it's
too.
Good to talk to you.
I miss seeing you.
Do you know the origins of the hummingbird cake? I mean, where, Mrs. Wiggins maybe even found the recipe?
Oil cakes, especially during the 60s and 70s and sort of into the 80s, were hugely popular. So I think she may have done like improvised on a carrot cake, because the elements are real similar. The carrot cake was hugely popular, and, she could have just decided to substitute bananas for the carrots. And a lot of carrot cake recipes have, they're lightly spiced like that. The hummingbird traditionally has some cinnamon in it. And carrot cake is lightly spiced, and a lot of people put the canned crushed pineapple in the carrot cake recipe. So those recipes are very similar. And the carrot cake had the cream cheese frosting on it. So it could have just been something she created because she had some bananas on hand, or like a twist on a banana, just a banana cake and adding those elements to it.
We know she was a good cook. All of her family has said how much she loved to cook. And she cooked for her neighbors and had them over, and she was a very social person. But I love carrot cake, and that's the first thing I thought of too, Mary Ellen, that it was very similar to a carrot cake.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's what she did. She may have heard about that cake, and maybe she just,
it's interesting that no one else has claimed ownership of it in any way, that there are not really any records of it before that. Because I love doing research on different recipes and foods, and a lot of times people will reference a source from 100 years ago or something even, and other sources show up. But for the hummingbird cake, that I know of, there's never been another source. I almost just think that was something that, like I said, that, she made, and then everybody was telling her, oh my gosh, this is so delicious, you ought to send it to Southern Living, because then that was just a hallmark in the South of having your recipe validated if it appeared in Southern Living.
And everybody said she was a great cook, so I could totally see her doing what you said, coming up with this, maybe a variation on the carrot cake or something.
Yeah, that seems the most logical to me. Like, hearing that she cooked so often, I'm sure she was very comfortable in the kitchen and was comfortable with making substitutions. And, for so many years, people just used what they had on hand, too.
Mary Ellen is one of the reasons Mrs. Wiggins' legacy seems to be always present at Southern Living. In her almost 20 years with the magazine, Mary Ellen spent hours upon hours with the hummingbird cake recipe. She's the brains behind so many of Southern Living's variations over the years.
Mary Ellen is just a genius when it comes to coming up with all of these recipe profiles, these flavors. It's just amazing to me, Mary Ellen, how you do this. So how did you come up with these various variations of the hummingbird cake?
The first variation I did was actually a contender for the Christmas cover, the December cover, maybe like 10 or 12 years ago. And my notion there, because of course, you know, my philosophy is there's no such thing as too much of a good thing. So I liked the flavor profile of it, and I thought it would make a great coffee cake for breakfast, especially during the holiday time. And I baked it in a bundt pan and put extra nuts in the bottom of the bundt pan so it would kind of have that nutty coffee cake topping when you turned it out, and then did a cream cheese glaze to go on it.
Mary Allen and her team in the test kitchen developed many more hummingbird cake-inspired recipes that were big hits. Pam Lawley, who we spoke to in episode 1, tested many of those recipes.
I know that we have turned it into cupcakes. I know it has been a bundt cake with the icing drizzled over the top. We've done a pancake and turned the icing into a cream cheese syrup that was drizzled over the top, but it always had the same components. It would always incorporate the bananas, the pineapple, the spices, which was cinnamon.
I also found in 2014 we did a power bar. Someone did a power bar. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. It was
a hummingbird.
It was developed for breakfast.
Power bar is a hummingbird cake power bar.
Right.
That's the kind of power
bound
bar
to be healthy.
Like.
Yeah, bound to be real healthy.
It's had an impact in that we've done over 10 different versions of it.
Editor-in-Chief Sid Evans again.
We've had a lot of fun with it, and I think the readers have had a lot of fun with it. And even when we've made videos about it, you know, we made a video about it for our 50th anniversary, and it was viewed more than 20 million times on Facebook. And, you know, you think about that. This is a recipe that was first published in 1978. And we make a video about it in 2016, and it gets that many views. I mean, there is just something about that cake that people really love, and so you know, the impact just continues to resonate with people, and hopefully it will for a long time.
It sounds like you spent so much time with her recipe, working off of it. If you could say anything to Ms. Wiggins, like what would you love to talk to her about?
I would love to talk with her about how she did come up with the cake. And I'd love to share with her just all the joy that it's brought to people. I mean, you know, when I think of food, you know, it's about really sharing and sharing in fellowship with other people, and it's an offering to the people that you love, and it sounds like that's the way that she really lived her life.
As Nell and I have learned more and more about Mrs. Wiggins, one thing keeps coming to my mind. We talked to almost a dozen people who knew her at different points in her life, and Mrs. Wiggins was exactly what each person needed in their life when they met her. For Dolores Griffith, it was a surrogate mother for a college freshman away from home for the first time.
She really kind of calmed my fears and helped me to kind of assimilate into the college life. And I am so grateful for her for doing that, because I think she kind of sensed that I needed some mothering. But she was a wonderful woman. She really was.
For Joan Steele, it was a friend and nurturer to help care for Joan's 3 children.
I trusted her explicitly with my kids. Needless to say, it seemed like when we met her, we came into her life when she needed us, and she came into our lives when we needed her.
And for Southern Living, a deliverer of a recipe so special it's become a regular at Southern gatherings celebrating some of life's best moments.
Probably when she passed away, she had no idea, like, how much joy that had brought to people for birthday celebrations and family reunions.
40 years later, she's still a daily source of inspiration for our staff.
To me, Mrs. Wiggins represents a Southern Living reader. She's just doing her thing, cooking for her family, taking care of people, not realizing that she's special at that very moment. So I would love to just tell her, I'd like to give her a hug.
I know.
I think that's, I just want to give her a hug because I feel like she's our mom, she's our grandmother.
Yeah.
And again, she represents what Southern living was designed for.
There were a lot of people who submitted recipes over the years over and over again. Miss Wiggins, as far as we know, this is the one recipe that she submitted. And boy, what an impact it had.
Named for the tiny bird who will appear 1 second and be gone the next, the hummingbird cake and the legacy of the woman who sent it here is anything but fleeting. Biscuits and Jam is produced by myself, Meg Pace, with Nellah McGough. Executive producers Mike Grady and Sid Evans. Sound mixing by Jason Keener. For photos, videos, and the hummingbird cake recipe, visit our website, southernliving.com/culture/podcast. Thanks to digital editor Abby Wilt and fellow Jory McDonald for maintaining that page for us. Our logo and art is by Miles Kane. As always, thanks to our editor-in-chief Sid and executive editor Chrissy Tiglius for giving us this assignment. And there are so many more people to thank for helping us put this podcast together. Mary Ellen Perry, who let us pick her encyclopedia of a brain, assistant food editor Pat York, test kitchen specialist Pam Lawley, Dolores Griffith and Joan Steele, who answered our call for more information on Mrs. Wiggins and got this whole thing started. And of course, thank you from the bottom of our hearts to Mrs. Wiggins' family, her sister Evie Rakes, her daughter Janet Silcox, and her grandchildren David and Brenda for sharing with us so many details about this special woman.
And if you like Biscuits and Jam, leave us a review. It helps other folks find our story. And we think everyone should know about Mrs. Wiggins and her decadent hummingbird cake. And subscribe so you know when we're back with Season 2.
And then one other thing, I have a surprise for you today.
You do?
I do. Let me get it back here.
Wow. What is that? We get to eat? Is that hummingbird cake?
It is. It's the
So this is wrapping it up with...
This is wrapping it up.
With actually eating the cake.
This is the bundt cake version that Southern Living, one of the Southern Living's variations. And I would like to say that I totally planned this for you, but actually they were just making it in the studio, and so I swiped it.
Well, you know what? That is how great things happen. Like accidental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show that we are literally always making this cake.
Yep. Isn't that hilarious?
I know.
Thank you, Mrs. Wiggins, once again for this great recipe that we tend to make in every kind of variation. You know, maybe we should do a hummingbird cake milkshake.
Ooh, that sounds good. Here you go.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything they make up in the test kitchen, too, is incredible.
I know. This is actually really good for breakfast.
It's really good for breakfast. Too bad I already had a bacon biscuit, but I'm still going to eat this.
Any parting thoughts on Mrs. Wiggins since you've spent so many months thinking about her?
I have a mouthful of hummingbird cake right now. I was looking back at the pictures in my folder the other day.
Your Mrs. Wiggins folder?
It is a Mrs. Wiggins folder. You know, and so I was looking back and looking at her pictures, and she's just got the sweetest face and seems to have such a sweet disposition that she actually should be remembered for the sweetest cake, too. You know? It's just delightful, as I'm sure Mrs. Wiggins was delightful. I hate we didn't get to know her in person.
I know. But she lives on here.
Yep,
at Southern
she
Living.
sure does. Thank you, and cheers, Mrs. Wiggins.